Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob and today we're going to take you through how to paint a red ghost keel for Tau. This is probably the second Tau model I have ever created or painted. Took a lot of inspiration online. There's lots of great kind of red Tau out there, but I thought it would be a great opportunity, this model today, to play around with the reds, but also see how speed paint and the new Warpaint Fanatic range from the Army painter interact with one another. Because I think that if you are a hardcore Army painter lover, you're going to want to know how the two things interact with each other, especially with some of the reactivation issues we had on the first set of Warpaint. So, of course, you're probably going to have questions, and what I'm going to do is try and answer those questions for you today and take you through my experience of kind of applying Warpaint over the whole model and seeing if that does interact with one another. So, let's take it away, first of all, with a black undercoat. Now, the red elements are going to be given a black primer, and we're going to start off with some reds here. So, 3 reds from the new Army Painter Warpaint range. But what I would say about these reds, so let me just get them out for you. So, we had Wyvern Fury, we had Blood Chalice, and we also had Dragon Red as well. So I talked a lot in previous videos about kind of a triad and the flexible triad that they have. Now these are actually, when we kind of talked about that triad, these would fall under the 2, the 3, and then the 5 kind of the numbers, where if they're going from 1 to 6. So there is a little bit of a jump between Dragon Red and then Blood Chalice. What you could use though is kind of pure red would be the 4th jump, but in reality I don't think it actually mattered for what I was going to kind of do in the end, and I painted this kind of with the intention of maybe playing around with some speed paints on top of it, but actually, as you'll see later, I kind of go all in on the speed paints, but I think it's a good demonstration, this, even then, of what the colours can do. And you can see the Wyvern Fury just over a black undercoat is still really punchy. And this is one of the things that we brought out in the last video, in the airbrushing video. We said actually there doesn't need to be a white pre-highlight underneath for these colours to really have some punch. Which I'm still really impressed with, actually. That's one of the standout things with these colours. I would say that this was probably 2 or 3 thin coats. Going to move on to Dragon Red now, and this is if I didn't mention it before, we're sticking around the cool reds for this particular model. Certainly in this, all these reds here are cool reds, and we talked last time about kind of their brilliant reds and the cool reds and the differences between the two. But as I say, I'll be using blood red speed paint over the top of this. So really what we're kind of thinking is that we've got cool reds within the shadows of our model, and we'll reinforce those later with some purples, and then the blood red, which is quite a it's again a red with a lot of punch. Looks amazing against the kind of like the cool reds within the shadows. Some of you though might just be happy with this kind of Dragon Red over the top of Wyvern Red. I think that this is still a really punchy red, and by punchy I'm just talking about the vibrancy of the colours. I think red is one of those colours where it can look good when you airbrush it, and then by the time you get to the end, just all the magic and all the vibrancy of the colour can just disappear so easily. We're going to move on to Blood Chalice now. So remember, there is a step between Blood Chalice and Dragon Red. These are not kind of like a natural jump from one another, but actually when you're airbrushing them, the jump is absolutely fine between the two. As I said before in the airbrushing video, I used a 1-to-1 mix of thinner to the new Warpaint Fanatic range, and that seemed enough, around between 20 and 30 psi, and that was enough to get it through the airbrush well and smoothly with no kind of issues with any kind of spray patterns. So you could stick to this red, but I wanted to play around with kind of the speed paints on top of this as well. So I've used Ruby Skin
Now you could use white here, but again I wanted to use some of these colours that, and again, you know, I'm using lots of these paints for the first time I've ever used Ruby Skin, so I'm just really experimenting and showing you what I'm experimenting with here, but I'm just using this as an additional highlight. So we have the cool reds within the shadows, and then we have the Ruby Skin highlight, and then what we're going to do is use a filter over the top of this to bring everything all together, and it's going to really, the speed paint is going to really give it some vibrancy. The good thing about the speed paint is that they're similar to inks in the way that they work through an airbrush, which is that they are transparent or translucent. They are not opaque in the way that Warpaint's Fanatic are, but they are quite really highly pigmented, which means that they have a lot of vibrancy to them. And then the other thing on top of that is that you can see the highlight underneath it as well. So you can see the cool reds within the shadows, but you can also see the laying this filter over the top it's got some real punch to it. And you can see here the difference between the two. And I think the difference between cool reds and I guess like a hot red or a brilliant red from the blood red. Blood red, I think, as a speed paint is really worth investing in. I find that I use it an awful lot in all sorts of projects. But as I say, this has really created a lot of vibrancy now to this Tau scheme. I think that on reflection, you probably didn't need to do Wyvern, Dragon Red and Blood Chalice. You could probably just do Wyvern and then go straight to the Ruby Skin, or Wyvern Fury and then Dragon Red and go to the Ruby Skin. But as I say, I'm just learning a lot with these paints as I do them, and just going over those final areas where there might just be a little bit of Ruby Skin left over. Going for Hive Dweller Purple now. Now, the reason I'm doing this is to add some shadows, make the whole model a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dynamic with our paint job. But also, if we darken down areas, it will make those highlighted areas seem even brighter. That's another reason why we add quite dramatic shadows in. It will help the highlights pop. So this is, again, just straight through the airbrush. Same with the blood red, didn't thin it down at all. And I'm just choosing specific areas where I think that the shadows will have will be the most dynamic. So on the sides of the legs, thinking about the light, thinking about shading, thinking about what looks good as well on this model. So I think with Warhammer models, sometimes what looks good has to give way to reality, but also vice versa sometimes as well, which is what looks good needs to, reality needs to give way to what looks good. So as you can see, that has really deepened the shadows down and made it a really dramatic kind of highlight with that red now. So I think at this point I was like, well, okay, yeah, I'm really pleased with this red and how it's looking. So we're going to go straight to the black areas, and very limited amount of metallics used on kind of Tau models after doing a little bit of research. I'm not kind of a massive expert on Tau, but I do love the black red combo. It's such a good looking combo, and again, these having large amounts of areas broken up in black helps the red pop further, because you have such a dramatic contrast between the two now, between that popping red and then the black, and it will just make the red seem even more like, it's even more brilliant. And I think that using lots of these techniques helps the red, because I think red is such one of those colors where you can do all these things to it, all these fancy things, and at the end it just looks quite drab and dull. So using these techniques like blocking in large amounts of black really helps the red to pop. Just over to the head, so I'm going to use Frost Blue, which is basically the top end of the desaturated blue greys. So this is a very pale bluish grey, it tells me. And I did a couple of thin coats. I think I did 3 thin coats over a white primer. I think that if you're looking to do white, Frost Blue is a really nice kind of layer, and then you do your white straight over the top of it. Or at least the frost blue is a really nice base, and then you do the white over the top of it. And I think that you could say the same for kind of shoulder pads as well. If you're thinking, oh, I want to do some shoulder pads on some Marines, for example, but I'm not sure what to lay down as a base, should I just do a grey or something like that? I think try frost blue as a base, and then highlight it with white and see where you get to, because I think it could be used for any Legion, any Space Marine chapter, any kind of model as well. I think it's just a really nice transition, the frost blue straight to the white. And I built up this in very thin layers, this white as well. Right, so we're going to use uniform grey and ash grey now. Now, uniform grey is a colour that I use an awful lot. You've seen me use it a lot with the Warpaint's air range, so I was curious to see how this looks. Now, there's quite a lot of footage here. What I don't want to do with this model, which I want to do in a relatively short amount of time, I didn't really want to spend that long on it, but what the temptation is to spend a long time on the blacks. But the black isn't the main area, is it? It's the reds that are the main areas that we really want to focus on to make pop. So the black is the secondary element to it, but it takes up an awful lot, and all these awkward things in the black as well, and you could spend days edge highlighting all those bits, and yeah, it would look really good all edge highlighted, but sometimes we're doing these things at speed and we just don't either have the technical ability or the time to be able to edge highlight them. So I want to show you a quick way to do it. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the uniform grey and I'm doing a very, very rough highlight on all of the black elements where I think the light would touch, or again where I think it will look most dramatic. Now this is super rough. I'm doing this with a very, very small dry brush, and I do it over the entire kind of black areas, but I'm leaving some black areas kind of in shadow. Then I'm going to go straight up to ash grey using a slightly bigger brush, and I'm just picking out kind of the edges mainly here. So the uniform grey was quite broad, and then just pick out the edges with the ash grey just with a dry brush. You might need to have various different sizes of dry brushes, makeup brushes, whatever you want to use to be able to do this process. But as I say, this is just picking out the edges. Now this looks quite messy, and it looks quite dramatic considering we just want it to be a black. We want it to read as black rather than read as grey. So we're going to need to do something about that, which is that we are going to smooth down all these really harsh transitions with some grim black now. Now you could do this through the airbrush, or you could paint this on. I've decided to do it with the airbrush. And what you can see me doing here is just very carefully, and I've turned the PSI right down to around 15 or 20, very carefully on just the black elements, just going over all that grey, and that just smooths everything out. It knocks it all back, but also I can hit the areas which are in the shadows as well. But the main reason I'm doing this is that it smooths everything out. So I've got some quite natural looking highlights that renders the black elements without too much hard work. This kind of took me like 5 minutes. It didn't take too long at all, but it is rendered, which is the most important thing. We don't want it to be left unrendered or unpainted, because the black elements are such an important integral part to this. Now the black oil wash that we'll use a little bit later will go into all the recesses as well, which will help us to kind of knock that grey back. But this is a very quick way. If you're looking to do Tau and you can't be bothered with rendering all the shapes with edge highlights, this is a very quick way to be able to just render those black elements. But it's exactly the same. You could do it the same with any model. If you're thinking Dark Angels for Horus Heresy, or you're thinking Black Templars for 40k, you could do some dry brushing and then just go over it with an airbrush, and then it will knock everything back from there. So we're going to use a mixture of brown and matte black. I can't remember the brown that it was used. Was it might have been Bootstrap Brown or Ruddy Brown or Dryad Brown. I've got so many browns in front of me here, but you guys probably saw it. And we're just stippling this on for a little bit of battle damage. I'm not going absolutely berserk with this. There's absolutely no need. It's the red that I really want to show off with this model, but just a little bit of chipping here and there is good. And also the reason why I like to do this is that you might have caught the red elements with the black paint when you were painting, and this just kind of like masks it up and looks a little bit like battle damage as well. So I've left quite a lot of footage in here because I want to talk about oil paint. So some of you will I suspect most of you will be kind of fairly familiar with the format of these videos and how they work and the kinds of techniques that I use. Some of you are going to be Tau enthusiasts who are coming to these videos for the first time ever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some oil paints. Now the oil paints are great because they're effectively a wash, but I can do some cleanup with them a little bit later. So I can be a bit more slapdash than I am with a wash. So that means I can be a bit quicker and then clean it up a little bit later. Now I've used a gloss varnish over the entire Tau Ghost Kill. And you can do that either through rattle can, but I've used the airbrush to put a gloss varnish down. And then I've got a Winsor & Newton oil paint here, which is just lamp black, and then I've mixed it with some white spirits, some odorless white spirits. Now white spirits you can pick up from literally any store you can get off Amazon, and then these oil paints you can literally pick off of eBay or something like that, right? You know, they are really accessible. They cost about £5 a tube, and they will last you a couple of years. You won't get through them, you know, at all. And what you can see is that because we've got the gloss varnish there, the black oil wash is just going and running into all the gaps and all the recesses, so it pin washes it really easily for us. And the reason why I prefer to do this over, say, you know, a wash, you know, you guys might be familiar with Nuln Oil, something like that. There's of course Dark Tone from the Army Painter. You know, the reason I prefer to do it this way is that I can afford to be a little bit more slapdash and then clean it up a little bit later. And also the oil dries in a way that kind of makes it look like a build-up of soot and grime, as well as kind of rendering the shape of the model. And what you can see here is kind of the model once it's been pin washed, and then I put a matte varnish over the top of it as well. So when you've done that matte varnish, you're then ready to go on to the metallics or some of the other metallics. Now the metallic elements that we've got to do are actually very, very limited. I just chose some golds. I was like, oh, should I paint them in white? But I want to show off the golds to you guys. You know, I'm sure you'll be interested in the Fanatics range as we get closer to the point where it gets released. So I've started off with Greedy Gold. And again, these are all new formulations on their kind of previous paints. But Greedy Gold was a gold that existed in the previous line, but I think it's now been reformulated. But it does match the colour of the old Greedy Gold. What I would say over red though, and with a metallic this bright, is that you will need two thin coats. There's just no way around that. You know, you've got a very bright metallic over the top of over red, and red can be quite a powerful colour when you've got basically when you're painting yellow on the top of it. So you know, just leave it to dry it with a hairdryer, then come back to it and then do a second coat. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a very rough highlight with bright gold, which is a very, very yellow gold. And you don't need to do the whole thing. You can see me just picking out where I think the light will hit, you know, considering all of the you know, the angles where we've been hitting it with the airbrush. And I think that this looked really nice, and I thought that this halos the head really, really nicely as well, because you've got these pops of gold on either side of the head, but also underneath the head as well. So haloed it really nicely. And we're going to use purple tone. And the reason why I'm using purple is because it is a contrasting colour to yellow. So, you know, and it's a thing that ties our whole model together. We're using cool reds, which you saw as our base coat, and cool reds are going to have purples within them. We then use Hive Dweller purple to shade it, and now we're using purple within our golds to help with the contrast as well. So there's as I'm doing this, I am thinking about the themes, thinking about the colours that I'm using as well, and using a relatively limited colour palette with the kind of the shades and washes and things like that I'm using. I would do a second, once that's dried, I would do a second coat of your purple wash. So we are going to move on to the OSL elements of our model now. So we're going to use matte white. This goes down really, really nicely. I'm using it on a dry palette rather than a wet palette. You could use it on a wet palette if you want to. Didn't make a whole lot of difference because I wasn't going to spend a long time doing this. I was just going around quickly. I didn't need the white to last for long. What I would say is that it actually covered really nicely, and I was quite impressed with the white and how it covered. And you can see there, that's just one coat of white with a little bit of water added in, just to get it moving, and that's all it took. And I don't think I came back to it for a second coat. If there were any areas or patches, of course I would, but I was pretty pleased with the coverage overall of that matte white. And as I say, it's just mixed with a little bit of water. Now, I'm not an expert on Tau. I just kind of picked areas that I thought would be glowing, which were basically these baubles dotted over the model, and including the islands. Now, Tau aficionados will know better than me what are glowing and what shouldn't glow. But I think that that is completely up to you. I just picked a few areas just to show off the techniques more than anything. But if you want to add more bits that are glowing, then you certainly can. There are obviously some areas on the side of the heads that I didn't do. I thought that would be a little bit too much to have these little balls on the side of the head, kind of glowing as well as the one on the front. And as you can see here, we've got the white areas that picked out, and we're going to go to the airbrush now. So you're going to have to turn the pressure down a little bit. You're going to need to concentrate. I would take the cap off of your airbrush as well. This is a completely useless shot here because you can't see what I'm actually doing. But you're just going to be careful, and basically you're going to hit your give a couple of toots of the airbrush around these balls, so it just hits the ball, the glowing ball that we've got, but also hits around the outside as well. I'm not moving it around. I'm just almost aiming at the ball and giving a couple of toots, and then that does the job really nicely. Because we've got the very opaque paint in the center, and then we've got this ring airbrushed around the outside, just where we've done a couple of toots. It means that this is going to be a great foundation for our OSL effect. And you might have seen this kind of technique before used. I'm sure it's plastered all over Instagram by other artists as well. But it's an absolutely classic and easy way to create an OSL effect. And the great thing about Tau, I think, is that it's actually easy to do OSL effects like this. I think that they work really, really well. You'll notice on the gun, though, that what I'm not doing is spraying. I just thought that it would look a little bit of a mess, so I've just painted the inside of the gun, I guess. You can see it here. But I haven't sprayed it with the airbrush. I think that's important because I think it probably would look a little bit messy. And then the OSL paint that we're going to use here, or the fluorescent paint that we're going to use here, will kind of go onto the sides anyway. So that would be my advice. Just do the overspray on the balls, not on the guns. And then what I would really recommend, and a mistake I made, was I mixed thinner with the Plasma Coil Glow paint. You don't need to. It will go straight through the airbrush. And because I added thinner in, it meant that basically I had to add like 5-6 very thin layers of this paint over, and then kind of worked out that actually it was completely unnecessary to thin it. It will go fine through the airbrush if you just put it straight in. So yeah, just a word of warning there. Then I've mixed this Plasma Coil Glow just with a little bit of white, and then I'm just going to dot it in the center. You can just see there I'm dotting in the center, so it's almost creating that luminous effect, and the center is the brightest element, creating the light. And then that is it. No more than that, really. The footage here you can see is just me kind of going around on all these parts, just kind of stippling on that white. I've mixed a little bit of water in, but it's just matte mixed with Plasma Coil Glow. And this is the OSL effect. This is all it needs to be. And you can see, it still packs a punch. Because of the foundation that we've laid, it also looks realistic as well. You can see here just on the gun, I'm just getting the middle of this part. I'm not hitting it on the sides, just on the center, as if the glow is coming from the center of that barrel. I've been quite rough with it. You can afford to be quite rough with it. It's quite hidden away. And you can just see I'm just hitting the bottom of it where the light will hit as well. As I say though, you only want to do really the middle of the barrel, and the same goes for his little guns on the side. Just be a little bit more careful here and just hit it just in the middle, as if the glow is coming from the, I guess, the centre of the barrel, just to sell the effect. But yeah, as I say, just remember, plasma, coil, glow, you don't need to worry about thinning with the airbrush, or thinning with thinner through the airbrush. Learn from my mistakes. And we're going to do a little bit of a green base, and then we'll add some green tufts on a little bit later. But I just wanted to kind of mix some very thin washes together with some water, just trying out some of these greens, just seeing what they were like. And that just allowed me to kind of build up some interest on the base. And the reason I am using green is because it's a contrasting colour to red. So again, thinking about that colour wheel, thinking about that colour theory, I want the red to pop as much as I possibly can, and one of the ways that I can do that is by using greens within the base and green tufts as well, because it will make it appear that the red is popping off of that green base. So it's really common to use bases as a way to kind of make your models kind of pop, and this is exactly what I've done, and this is it. This is what we've created. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed that tutorial. I hope you've learnt a lot. I think for me, I wanted to show you what speed paints do interacting with Warpaint's Fanatic range, and the answer is not a lot. No reactivation, nothing like that. They're just another useful tool within the kind of the three main sets that the Armour Painter kind of sell. I hope you enjoy the video. And make sure that you leave me a like. I'd love to hear what you think, and if this is the first time here, don't forget to subscribe as well, and I shall see you on the next one.